Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining today. My name is Jeremy Bilfeld, and we are thrilled to showcase Atacama's distributed key management, which enables the ultimate protection for sensitive data in today's distributed work environment. We're excited to introduce the power of a true zero-trust file system that's redefining the way organizations secure sensitive data and make protecting and accessing information simple and easy to use. It is my pleasure to introduce our co-founder and COO of Atakama, Dmitry Nemirovsky. Dmitry will walk us through Atacama's one-of-a-kind multi-factor encryption software that is disrupting the information security space. Just a reminder, if you do have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to submit them in the questions tab on the right-hand side, and we'll answer them at the end of the demonstration. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dmitry.
Thank you, Jeremy. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate your joining us here today, the day before a long weekend, technically. Super excited to be here. It's been a couple of weeks since our last 15-minute lunch break, and on the menu today, as always, is encryption, near and dear to us, right? So I want to start by asking for a show of hands, even though I'm not going to be able to see who's showing their hands. How many people are using encryption, and how many people think their encryption is actually protecting their sensitive data? And I'd love to have that debate if I had that opportunity with folks. But instead, I'll just posit what I know the conclusion is. I think encryption, for the most part, is a, quote, problem that people have seemingly solved for. What do I mean by that? More often than not, what we see in our day-to-day with our customers and with our prospects is a mindset that encryption is usually a check-the-box cybersecurity solution. If you're using BitLocker or full disk or full volume encryption solution, or you're relying on the cloud providers encryption in order to be able to satisfy whether it's compliance, internal requirements, whatever the case may be, a lot of security practitioners are under the false assumption that their encryption is actually safeguarding their sensitive data. What I just suggested with respect to the mindset of believing that your data is actually secure 20 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago, probably would have been more correct than it is today. This is what I mean. The attack surface has really changed and it's morphed, and we're witnessing it on a daily basis. A decade ago, 2 decades ago, there was a concern around physical theft of devices, physical theft of server hard drives where you had sensitive information. And those server farms, corporations used to have to protect, right? That was their sensitive crown jewels. And you had tons of physical security around that perimeter. And anyone who's ever visited one of those facilities, really tight on the physical security infrastructure. And that's because that's how attacks took place. The concept of moving those attacks to the digital domain really accelerated over the past 15 plus years. And what we're witnessing now is a situation where that physical security is really an afterthought. And it's an afterthought because that's not how data is stolen these days. As we all know full well, data these days is stolen primarily through social engineering attacks, right? Utilizing the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain. And that weakest link is the human element. No matter how good your policies and procedures may be, no matter how good your system and your infrastructure may be, no matter how buttoned up you think you are, you're never going to stop every single end user from clicking on that link that they shouldn't click on, from opening the attachment they shouldn't be opening, or doing other things that they should not be doing. It's inevitable. And the question is not, when, but how often these events are going to happen. And so when we move away from the physical security realm, we talk about the digital realm, and taking this back to where I started, which is a show of hands, how many people think encryption is actually protecting and safeguarding their sensitive information? The answer is very few encryption products these days are actually encrypting data in a way where you, as the security professional, are actually deriving value from that solution. So if you think of BitLocker as a good example, we hear that often. It's like, why is BitLocker, not sufficient? I don't want to pick up BitLocker, but it's just top of mind. Or, I'm using OneDrive. Why isn't OneDrive's baked-in encryption sufficient for my encryption needs? Well, the answer is Potentially it is under the following scenario. You have information that's in the cloud, you get attacked, and you don't have anything on-prem, and for whatever reason, the attacker is unable to find your cloud location. Really elemental attack, probably not realistic because they likely will be able to find that location. But in that circumstance, okay, great. They weren't able to, access the information. Or, somehow a user's laptop was left behind in an airport terminal. Okay, potentially that hard drive is secure. But that's not reality. Reality these days is the sophisticated attackers know where to look and know where to find the information. And the problem with all of these, what I refer to as conventional/legacy encryption solutions, is they are tied in one form or another to the user's credentials. So when I log in as an authorized user, everything that is available to me is instantly available to the attacker. Why? Because when I authenticate and the system recognizes me as an authorized user, everything to which I've been granted permission is on a wholesale basis decrypted and available to me. And so when that attacker, that adversary, is somehow able to either compromise my credentials or trick me into allowing them to get into the system or the network, well, for them too, that information, and I'll happily discuss and debate this with individuals, but the reality is that these traditional encryption products are not sufficient. They're not protecting your sensitive data. So a product like encryption has to evolve, and that's where we come in, right? Atakama is evolved encryption, right? And the theme today is distributed key management. Atakama does something super different from any other encryption solution out there. And that is, we are able, by virtue of our innovative distributed key management architecture, we are not reliant on those identity and access management controls. And by disconnecting from those identity and access management controls, even when my credentials are compromised, everything to which I have access remains encrypted. And that's because we basically took encryption and flipped it on its head. And we said, okay, you have this powerful tool, right? The encryption algorithms are never what is being attacked, right? It's the user's access to the encrypted data that's being attacked. And so if you disconnect the encryption from those user credentials, now you are actually harnessing the true power of encryption, right? So in the scenario I described earlier, where when an adversary is able to compromise an authorized user's credentials and now have wholesale access to everything, with Atakama, we prevent that, period, full stop, the end. And the way we do it is because we take those encryption keys and we distribute those keys out to authorized users onto their physical devices. So let me show you what I mean. So here's a location where I have stored sensitive files. For the record, these are all demo files. No PII or PHI or any of the sort is in here. These are all dummy files. I seemingly, because I have access to this location, I can double click into this environment and I should be able to have access to all of this information. But because Atakama encrypts granularly at the file level, we then take that encryption key for each file. Each file has its own unique AES-256-bit key. Atakama's architecture requires that key to be distributed. And so if I'm an attacker and I gain access to this location, which by the way happens to be OneDrive, and I double click on this file, I should be able to open it. It didn't open. It times out. And the reason it timed out and the reason it didn't open is because with Atakama's architecture, right, you require the user to have an additional piece of that key shard to be able to decrypt the file. And that key shard is on a physical device. So let me just force quit PDF here to get rid of this screen. But ultimately, what's happening behind the scenes with Atakama is when I go to double click on that file, and now I'm going to approve access to that file because I have the app on my phone, and I'm going to send back a piece of the key shard to allow that file to be able to open, right? What I've done is effectively, my phone now has the power of a server, but unlike a traditional key shard server, right, which is required to do one thing and one thing only, is to release keys to the authorized user. I am the authorized user, and I know when to release my own key shard. So I can't be tricked into releasing key shard. If I receive that notification in the middle of the night and I didn't request a file open, why would that file be being opened by, it's obviously either an attack or something else is going on. And so that's the power of Atakama's distributed key management system. It does not rely on that central key store, which is, again, just releasing those keys. It does not rely on my user credentials. It relies, again, on the server and the power of my hand. And I'm showing you the demo, and our common deployment is, in fact, the phone. But there are situations where we deploy not with the phone, but with a key shard server, which is driven by policies. And again, the difference between a central key store, which is just releasing those keys, Atakama's key shard server still requires a multiple reconstitution of key shards in order to be able to decrypt. So you have this incredible power, again, encryption. How do you harness it and maintain the power of encryption, the security that it really brings, the guarantees that you're able to make with that encryption algorithm? How do you bring it down to the level where you're able to secure your sensitive information in a way where, from a user standpoint, you saw how easy it was. You tap your phone, you send back a piece of the key shard, the file is decrypted. How do you harness it? And we've done that with the power of distributed key management. There are a ton of other features with our software that I can go into, but I do want to stay honest with the 15-minute lunch break guarantee here. And I do want to open this up to questions. But to the extent anyone wants to see any additional features, any additional demos, we'd be happy to accommodate. But at the end of the day, you know, if you are using encryption, you have to ask yourself and challenge yourself that fundamental question. Am I merely checking the box, or am I really attaining the security that I'm hoping for from this encryption product? And we'd be happy to have those conversations with you. But right now, I'll open it up to any questions that the audience may have.
Thank you so much, Dimitri. And again, a reminder, if anyone does have any questions, to submit them on the right-hand side in the questions tab. And we had a few come in. The first one is, great product. How does Atakama support auditability and audit tools?
So that's a broad question. I'd like to get a little bit more specific and better understand those tools, but we do not in any way interrupt other processes that may be running, other software that may be running. So if you're auditing, for example, and you're running a DLP and you want to know who's accessed which files, we do not interrupt any of that. In fact, we have our own tracking tool, which gets super granular, and our information can be fed into a central CMOR SOC as an example. And you're aggregating those logs, seeing who's accessed which files and when, and you can set various flags around them. So the cool thing about Atakama is we work really well in the sandbox with other products. And more often than not, we do not interrupt any intended behavior. To the extent we come up in environments that are really atypical and have some unique process, our team is phenomenal at working through those issues and making sure that our product can work and support various use cases in odd environments where they have some specificity. But for the most part, we do not interrupt any type of auditability or other type of software that calls and seeks information with respect to file access.
Thanks, Dimitri. And in regards to the phone as a key shard holder, do you have to tap approve for every single file?
No, there's, and I didn't show it. I do these calls a lot, and I try to mix them up a little bit. But I can show you quickly. You don't have to be as restrictive as to require the user to have to tap approve. And when I, said that the phone, it really is the power of a server, power of a server in the palm of your hand. It's all policy driven, right? So if the admin here provisioned and said, hey, I am authorizing my users to be able to open up a maximum of 50 files over 8 hours, I can launch that session window. And again, the benefit there, right? The really cool performance hack there is it's policy driven. You can max out and really, prevent your users from accessing more than they should during that session window. So we have a bunch of performance hacks with the software, but again, it depends on the policy and the use case, and you could be as restrictive as to require the user to have to tap approve for every single file, or you can, introduce a little bit of flexibility. There's always that fine line as security practitioners between security on the one hand and UX UI on the other. And again, if you think about those legacy encryption solutions, those are all UX UI. It's like, how do I make encryption completely transparent? Well, I'll tie it to identity and access management controls. I log in, everything's available to me, great. but you've really diminished the power of that encryption tool. And so we think we've really hit a good medium between being secure and user-friendly and not interrupting expected workflows.
That's right, thanks. And another question, does Atakama software integrate with Varonis?
Oh, I love that question, and it's one of our more prominent use cases. We work extraordinarily well with most any data discovery and classification tool, Microsoft Information Protection, and when we deploy in tandem with a data discovery and classification tool, instead of encrypting everything in a location, Atakama sits there, looks for those labels that are being applied by that data discovery tool. As sensitive data is discovered by that tool, as soon as that label is applied, Atakama instantly encrypts the particular file based on that label. So it's a great 1-2 combination where you have one tool out there scanning the environment, looking for the sensitive information, and as soon as that information is discovered, you have the remediation component in Atakama coming in and immediately protecting, locking down that information. It's a great use case.
That's right, and we'd love to speak further about that. If you reach out to us at info@atakama.com, we could have a further discussion on what exactly that looks like with further documentation. And some other questions here. How do you handle internal users who should not have access to a specific folder of classified or encrypted files?
So in the normal context, the permissioning is, that's dealt with by the administrator through Active Directory, right? The rights app, we're not rights management, right? That access is provisioned by the admin through Active Directory. However, what's really cool about our software is, and this use case comes up quite a bit, we have situations where the organization doesn't want IT admin professionals to be able to access the encrypted files. And so in that context, you can still have the IT admin, provision the locations, provision users to those locations, continue to provide the IT support that they need to provide to those users and the locations, et cetera. But the IT admin will not be part of the particular security group that has access to the encrypted files, right? And by virtue of that, they do not receive the key shards to be able to decrypt those files. So in effect, you're almost creating this physical barrier because they are not part of that security group from a cryptographic standpoint, even though in Active Directory, they potentially could still be part of that security group. They do not receive the keys. They are unable to access the encrypted files. Great use case, comes up a lot. We have situations where, you have various security groups in the traditional sense through Active Directory, like HR and finance and legal and regulatory. And, companies want to make sure there's no intermixing beyond the access rights. And Atakama is a great tool for that. Really does a bang up job, and we can get even more granular, and I can explain how we can even provision a situation where if you have a junior employee who needs to access a super sensitive file, it wouldn't be sufficient for that employee to be able to tap approve on their device. One of the employee's respective managers would have to tap approve on their phone as well, because we're utilizing something known as threshold cryptography. The minimum is 2 key shards, one on your computer, one on your phone, or a key shard server. But we can increase that threshold, and you can literally have a situation where a junior employee goes to open a sensitive file, and the manager says, "Why is Dimitri going to open this file?" "Oh yeah, he needs to open it." I tap approve, it opens. So it's similar to that nuclear key scenario. It's quite cool.
Excellent. Looks like there's time for one more. Does Atakama encrypt files that reside in OneDrive and Box.com?
So we support OneDrive, Box, Google Drive, Dropbox being the major commercial cloud providers. But we support pretty much any location, on-prem network, local, etc. Interestingly, we actually had a customer come to us within the past couple of weeks, and they're using an altogether separate cloud provider. And we did a couple of tests, and their bit locking worked, and it was fantastic. And we were able to integrate, and they're POCing right now. So quite pleased with that. So we should be able to support pretty much any backend location.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dimitri, and thank you all for joining today, and hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend. If there are any questions that you'd like to ask the rest of the team and follow up with us, please do. You can reach us at info@atakama.com, and you can find more information on our website. That's www.atakama.com. We look forward to speaking with you guys soon. And next month, we're going to be releasing a few other really interesting webinars. So stay tuned and see you on the next one.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.